you can start to ask other questions. Well, what about other books? The confession actually addresses this question as well. This is paragraph 4. The book's commonly called Apocrypha.
Doug, let's talk. I wanted to just, I know you've written on this and you've lectured on this, but just talk to us a little bit about how using, like, what does Sola, I'm going to get it out, Sola Scriptura mean? And then how is it that it doesn't actually prevent us or cause us to not use extra biblical material to help us gain a proper understanding of the text?
Well, I mean, if we go to our confession of faith, the very first sentence of the confession of faith tells you what Sola Scriptura is. It says the Holy Scripture is the only sufficient, certain, and infallible rule of, and it doesn't say all things. It doesn't say of science. It doesn't say of, pick a category, car repair. It says of all saving knowledge, faith, and obedience. And so this really tells you why God gave us his word. It's there to save us, and to tell us what we need to know to be saved, to tell us about the faith that we need to be saved, and to tell us about the obedience that God requires of us once we are saved. That's its purpose. And it is completely sufficient, utterly certain, and totally infallible in the way that it communicates that information to us. If it wasn't, then of course we wouldn't be able to trust that we were actually saved. Because this is what Sola Scriptura, as the confessions define itself, define Sola Scriptura as, then you can start to ask other questions. Well, what about other books? And the confession actually addresses this question as well. This is paragraph 4. The book's commonly called Apocrypha, not being of divine inspiration, are no part of the canon or rule of Scripture, and therefore are of no authority to the Church of God, nor to be anywise approved or made use of other than human writings. But look at that ending, other than human writings.
Right.
And so what it's basically saying there is that God did not give us the apocryphal books, and those are I forget how many there are, 13 or 16 or whatever books that you'll find in the Septuagint that were translated by the 70 Jews, and that made it into then the canons of Rome and Orthodoxy and such. Although I'm actually not entirely sure if they consider even the Apocrypha as on the same level as the other 66 books, or if they actually consider them deuterocanonical, which is kind of a second canon. Because that's the way that they're presented in the Septuagint. Like, they're really important. You can go and read Martin Luther and he'll tell you the Apocrypha is really important. You should read it. Everybody should read it. But it's not Scripture. And if we've defined Scripture as that which is for saving knowledge, faith, and obedience, then that's what it's condemning the Apocrypha for, that it's not something that you go to learn about that. But you go to it like you would, quote, any other human writing to learn about things that you might want to learn about. So if you want to learn about some intertestamental history that's not mentioned in the Scripture, go read the books of Maccabees, which are in the Apocrypha. That's perfectly legitimate thing to do. You're not going to it to learn how to be saved from it, but you're going to it to learn what happened in the Maccabean rebellions.
That's right. No, and that, I think your point to which you're making and the confession is made and thousands of Christians have understood for years is that Scripture does not tell us everything about life. It tells us everything we need to know about our spiritual life as far as our salvation and faith and what God expects of us in this world as far as how we should live and how we should believe. But outside of that, it doesn't tell us a lot about our world. And at times we want the Bible to do that. We want it to explain everything about our world. And it's not its design. And it's what's interesting is that our confession even talks about how at times the Bible is not sufficient, even to dealing with certain church matters, that it requires wisdom. Which when people
Like the
read that,
Council
they're
of Jerusalem, right? In Acts 15.
That's absolutely right. That's right. So, it's interesting where I know we can introduce certain things to people, concepts about our world, because people ask me all the time, thoughts. Well, I'm sure that Doug, you've been getting this for years. What you have thoughts about, things that the Bible is not very clear on. If chimera creatures and aliens and Bigfoots and all this kind of stuff. Where some of it we're just kind of like, we don't know. I mean, there are evidence for certain stuff, but the Bible, it doesn't actually name it out, say these don't exist, those are fake. It also doesn't necessarily point to every single creature or cryptid that's out there and says that they do exist, right? So there is some ambiguity when it comes to the Bible, and that sometimes really terrifies people. There are, for the last few weeks, we've been kind of arguing for the different structures that are in our Bibles when it comes to spiritual warfare. But Doug, it is fair to say at times, though, we're not always quite certain. Like Paul will use a word and I'm like, well, we kind of think we might know what that is. But everything, let me put it this way. Let me ask you a question. Everything that there is to know about the heavenly realm, do we know about it? And the answer to that is yes or no.
Yeah, there's no way. There's no possible way that we know everything. I mean, it tells us about the host of heaven, but it hardly tells us anything about him.
It's helpful to, one, understand context and understand what the intentions of the text is for. What is it leading towards? And it can be infuriating when we're trying to use the text to argue for something that really wasn't ever the intentions of the text. And that's what we want to get into, is that we can use, and it's, I think, healthy, to use extra biblical material to give us some insight and direction on a culture that a culture and a language we're far removed from.